It was surely better than what she had feared. "You can never button those shoes with your fingers," she laughed, as he redoubled his efforts to capture a tiny disc of pearl and set it into its small velvet socket. "Here, I have a button hook in my hand bag. Try this." She produced a small silver instrument from a gold link bag on her arm, and handed it to him. He took it helplessly, trying first one end and then the other, and succeeding with neither. "Here, let me show you," she laughed, pulling off one glove. Her white fingers grasped the silver button hook and flashed in and out of the velvet holes, knitting the little shoe to the foot in no time. He watched the process in humble wonder, and she would not have been a human girl not to have been flattered with his interest and admiration. For the minute she forgot who and what he was, and let her laugh ring out merrily, and so with shy audacity he essayed to take off the other shoe. They really felt quite well acquainted, and as if they were going on a day's picnic, when they finally gathered up their belongings and started down the road. Gordon summoned all his ready wit and intellect to brighten the walk for her, though he found himself again and again on the brink of referring to his Washington life, or some other personal matter that would have brought a wondering question to her lips. He had decided that he must not tell her who he was until he could put her in an independent position where she could get away from him at once if she chose. He was bound to look after her until he could place her in good hands, or at least where she could look after herself, and it was better to carry it out leaving her to think what she pleased until he could tell her everything. If all went well, they might be able to catch a Pittsburgh train that night and be in Washington the next day. Then, his message delivered, he would tell her the whole story. Until then he must hold his peace. They went gaily down the road, the girl's pale cheeks beginning to flush with the morning and the exercise. She was not naturally delicate, and her faint the night before had been the result of a series of heavy strains on a heart burdened with terrible fear. The morning and his kindness had made her forget for the time that she was supposed to be walking into a world of dread and sacrifice. "The years at the spring, the days at the morn," quoted Gordon gaily. "Mornings at 7. The hillsides dew pearled." He waved an umbrella off to where a hill flashed back 1,000 lights from its jeweled grass blades thickly set. "The larks on the wing, the snails on the thorn," went on Celia, suddenly catching his spirit, and pointing to a lark that darted up into the blue with a trill of the morning in his throat. Gordon turned appreciative eyes upon her. It was good to have her take up his favorite poet in that tone of voice, a tone that showed she too knew and loved Browning. "God's in his heaven. All's right with the world," finished Gordon in a quieter voice, looking straight into her eyes. "That seems very true to day, doesn't it?" The blue eyes wavered with a hint of shadow in them as they looked back into the brown ones. "Almost, perhaps," she faltered wistfully. The young man wished he dared go behind that "almost perhaps" and find out what she meant, but concluded it were better to bring back the smile and help her to forget for a little while at least. Down by the brook they paused to rest under a weeping willow whose green tinged plumes were dabbling in the brook. Gordon arranged the suitcases for her to sit upon, then climbed down to the brook side and gathered a great bunch of forget-me-nots, blue as her eyes, and brought them to her. She looked at them in wonder. To think they grew out here wild, untended. She had never seen them before, except in pots in the florist's windows. She touched them delicately with the tips of her fingers, as if they were too ethereal for earth, then fastened them in the breast of her gown. "They exactly match your eyes!" he exclaimed involuntarily, and then wished he had not spoken, for she flushed and paled under his glance until he felt he had been unduly bold. He wondered why he had said that. He never had been in the habit of saying pretty things to girls, but this girl somehow called it from him. It was genuine. He sat a moment abashed, not knowing what to say next, as if he were a shy boy, and she did not help him, for her eyelashes drooped in a long, becoming sweep over her cheeks, and she seemed for the moment not to be able to carry off the situation. He was not sure if she were displeased or not. Her heart had thrilled strangely as he spoke, and she was vexed with herself that it should be so. A man who bullied and threatened her for 3 terrible months, and forced her to marry him, had no right to a thrill of her heart, nor a look from her eyes, be he ever so kind for the moment. He certainly was nice and pleasant when he chose to be. She must watch herself, for never, never must she yield weakly to his smooth overtures. Well did she know him. He had some reason for all this pleasantness. It would surely be revealed soon. She stiffened her lips and tried to look away from him to the purply green hills, but the echo of his words came upon her again, and again her heart thrilled at them. What if, oh, what if he were all right, and she might accept the admiration in his voice? And yet, how could that be possible? The sweet color came into her cheeks again, and the tears flew quickly to her eyes, till they looked all sky and dew, and she dared not turn back to him. The silence remained unbroken until a lark in the willow copse behind them burst forth into song and broke the spell that was upon them. "Are you offended at what I said?" he asked earnestly. "I am sorry if you did not like it. The words said themselves without my stopping to think whether you might not like it. Will you forgive me?" "Oh," she said, lifting her forget-me-not eyes to his, "I am not offended. There is nothing to forgive. It was beautiful." Then his eyes spoke the compliment over again, and the thrill started anew in her heart, till her cheeks grew quite rosy, and she buried her face in the coolness of the tiny flowers to hide her confusion. "It was very true," he said in a low, lover-like voice that sounded like a caress. "Oughtn't we to hurry on to catch our train?" said Celia, suddenly springing to her feet. "I'm quite rested now." She felt if she stayed there another moment she would yield to the spell he had cast upon her. With a dull thud of consciousness, the man got himself to his feet, and reminded himself that this was another man's promised wife, to whom he had been letting his soul go out. "Don't let anything hinder you. Don't let anything hinder you," suddenly babbled out the little brook, and he gathered up his suitcases and started on. "I am going to carry my suitcase," declared a very decided voice behind him, and a small hand seized hold of its handle. "I beg your pardon, you are not," declared Gordon in a much more determined voice. "But they are too heavy for you, both of them, and the umbrella, too," she protested. "Give me the umbrella, then." But he would not give her even the umbrella, rejoicing in his strength to shield her and bear her burdens. As she walked beside him she remembered vividly a morning when George Hayne had made her carry two heavy baskets that his hands might be free to shoot birds. Could this be the same George Hayne? Altogether it was a happy walk, and far shorter than either had expected it to be, though Gordon worried not a little about his frail companion before they came to the outskirts of the village, and kept begging her to sit down and rest again, but she would not. She was quite eager and excited about the strange village to which they were coming. Its outlying farmhouses were all so clean and white, with green blinds folded placidly over their front windows, and only their back doors astir. The cows all looked peaceful, and the dogs all seemed friendly. They walked up the village street, shaded in patches, with flecks of sunshine through the young leaves. If any one had told Celia Hathaway the night before that she would have walked and talked thus to-day with her bridegroom, she would have laughed him to scorn. But now, all unconsciously, she had drifted into an attitude of friendliness with the man whom she had thought to hate all the rest of her life. One long, straight, maple-lined street running parallel to the stream comprised the village. They walked to the center of it and still saw no signs of a restaurant. A post office, a couple of stores, and a bakery made up the business portion of the town, and upon enquiry it appeared that there was no public eating house, the one hotel of the place having been sold at auction the week before on account of the death of the owner. The early village loungers stared disinterestedly at the phenomenal appearance in their midst of a couple of city folks with their luggage, and no apparent means of transit except their two delicately shod feet. It presented a problem too grave to be solved unassisted, and there were solemn shakings of the head over them. At last one who had discouragingly stated the village lack of a public inn asked casually, "Had a runaway?" "Oh, no," laughed Gordon pleasantly. "We didn't travel with horses." "Had a puncture, then," announced the village wiseacre, shifting from one foot to the other. "Well, you come the wrong direction to get help," said another languid listener. "There ain't no garage here. The feller what used to keep it skipped out with Sam Galt's wife a month ago. You'd ought to 'a' turned back to Asheville.